Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the Michigan Center for Civic Education, we welcome you to the inaugural series of community conversations. My name is Ellen Swarnstein. I serve as the Executive Director at the Michigan Center for Civic Education. As many of you may know, we are Michigan's civic education advocacy group, and we serve to advance civic knowledge, civic belonging, civic engagement through a variety of student programs, including We the People, Mock Trial, Project Community, and we also work with a lot of teachers and districts and administrators to advance professional learning to meet the needs of our civic communities. Today, we are joined in conversation and in community to highlight some of the very specific needs and questions that are out there in the field. And in order for today to be possible, I would like to thank at least 3 people for making this possible. Glenn Ellen Lemberg, who has been our intern this year, who helped us kick off this series. She is a master's student at Grand Valley University studying public administration and nonprofit governance. Second, we would like to thank the generosity of Warner, Norcross, and Judd, who are helping to underwrite some of the work within the mock trial community along with this particular and important series. And then finally, I'd like to introduce and thank April Davidson, who will be our interpreter for this evening. The overall purpose of community conversations serves to bridge the K-12 communities with larger civic, governmental, philanthropic, and law-related education communities as well. And this afternoon's purpose takes inspiration from the theme of ability, accessibility, inclusion, and civic possibilities. We will focus on the personal and professional stories, reflections, and analysis regarding the lived experience, opportunities, and challenges within and beyond questions of accessibility, inclusion, diversity, ability and ableism, and so much more. While June provides a context of ability and accessibility and visibility, the federal language for this month is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, although we take some issue with the word disability in many contexts. We know that this is so much more than 1 month. This is a lifelong commitment. It is a call for greater inclusion, visibility, appreciation, and acknowledgement of the contributions and possibilities for a society where each person can be recognized for their strengths, their assets, in both the very individual ways, as well as looking at systems change in our public policy and civic institutions. This afternoon's speakers, were so honored that they are here with us tonight. They will dig a little deeper to explore and reveal the limits and possibilities of representation, visibility, accessibility, and education from their own perspectives. Each speaker will speak on issues at the forefront of their field, and we do acknowledge that the viewpoints expressed are those of the speaker themselves. Time will not do justice to their depth of knowledge. Rather, today will provide a survey with golden nuggets embedded to see where and how all community members can be more reflective to advance a more equitable society. So we will use the space for dialogue and explore pathways for greater understanding of civic possibilities. Along the way, stories of resilience, joy, resistance, and persistence will help us formulate our own civic and legal possibilities for all of us to see ourselves as part of the fabric of our society while working to make a more preferred and equitable future. I will be today's imperfect moderator, so at any time, please feel free to jump in and help along the way. And it is now my turn to introduce 2 panelists to begin with, and then we will switch over to 2 additional speakers as we proceed. And then we'll talk about the process for just a little bit. This conversation is open to the public. This will be recorded and placed on various social media avenues along with the MCCE website for use and reference over time. The use of the chat is enabled, so you can certainly type questions. Please do remember norms of collaboration, and I will put that link in the chat in just a moment. And today we really want to focus on clarifying what somebody is saying, getting to the shared meaning of what someone might be saying, and presuming the best of one another. We will hold our intention to stay in dialogue throughout this particular event. After the presenters have a chance to talk, we will have a brief rapid fire question opportunity, and then we will close it out with a takeaway comment from each of our speakers tonight. So without further ado, it is my honor to introduce the panelists. First, we will start with Dr. Sarah Cox. Dr. Sarah Cox is an assistant professor of special education at Eastern Michigan University. Her scholarly interests focus on academic supports for students with autism spectrum disorder. Her current projects explore how explicit instruction of mathematical practice standards, things like representation of mathematical thinking, problem solving, mathematical discourse, and abstract reasoning, can help students with ASD enhance their mathematical proficiencies. Her dissertation was recognized by the Council for Exceptional Children with the 2020 Division of Research Student Award for Single Case Designs. Congratulations on that. Dr. Cox taught mathematics and science in an inclusive K-12 classroom and undergraduate and graduate courses. Prior to completing her doctorate in curriculum and instruction, Dr. Cox also acted as an academic advisor to undergraduate students at Penn State University and as a fellowship advisor to the graduate students at Florida State University. So without further ado, we turn that over to you, Dr. Cox. We're excited to hear what it is that you have to share with us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I am going to try and share my screen. Can everyone see that? Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you to all of those who are joining us and or taking the time to listen in to what we have to say. I am honored to be here. So today I am going to be talking a little bit about inclusive practices for individuals with autism spectrum disorder. And I am going to be talking about this from my own perspective. So there we go. So a little bit about me, which Ellen already shared quite a bit, but my name is Sarah Cox. I have included my email up there so that in case anyone wants to reach out with further questions, or if you would like access to the resources that I'm going to share a little bit later on, please by all means reach out to me. I have two children, one of whom is on the autism spectrum and one of whom would be considered neurotypical or typically developing. That's how we tend to distinguish between the two. And so when I am talking to you today about inclusion, I am talking about opportunities for both of my children to interact with individuals who are not only similar to themselves, but as well as other diverse students, including those with neurodiversity. So that's what I am talking about with inclusion. They're having opportunities to interact with other kids who have different ways of viewing the world than they do. And hopefully we would like these experiences to occur within their own community. So we don't want one to have to go to a specialized opportunity because his or her brain may work a little bit differently. And then lastly, in order for them to both be successful within these environments, we want to make sure that appropriate supports are being provided so that they can both have an equally enjoyable experience and everyone there can benefit from one another. So the agenda today is I'm going to talk a little bit about an overview of ASD. So when I say ASD, I am referring to autism spectrum disorder, just the abbreviation for it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about inclusive practices. And these inclusive practices can be used in multiple environments. They are evidence-based practices for individuals with ASD. And then because I simply don't have enough time to be able to give you enough information, I am going to provide you with some additional resources. So I'm going to start with an overview of ASD, and I do this in hopes to explain a little bit about the background and the neurological differences that you may encounter so that you might understand better why you are observing some of the behaviors that you observe. So right now, for students with ASD or individuals with ASD to receive some kind of services, they can either have a medical diagnosis, which means that they go to some kind of psychologist or a team of a psychologist and a neurologist. Each state is a little bit different. And they get a medical diagnosis by that individual observing certain behaviors and determining that they do indeed fall within the autism spectrum. This diagnosis qualifies them for different types of services through their insurance potentially or other opportunities, private opportunities. Whereas school eligibility, the student can be eligible for services through a public school system if they obtain a school eligibility. It's not really a diagnosis, but again, they would have these same behaviors that we observe, and they also have a need for services within school, academically or behaviorally, so that they can be supported. So when I say behaviors, because autism is defined by the behaviors that we observe. There is no blood test. There is no scan that we can do of the brain. We diagnose this by observing behaviors. And there are really two different types of behaviors that we are looking for. So the first is some type of difference in the way that individuals with ASD communicate. So this can be a verbal or nonverbal, so meaning that the way they express their words or even the receptive language, so how they are understanding words that come in can be different. Their nonverbal language may be different. They may either overuse gestures or use different gestures. We often see that they use less gestures than some of their peers. Their social interactions may be different. Pragmatic language, their understanding of when it's okay to say certain things and maybe not other things may be a little more different, or a little different than their peers. So pragmatic language is the use of language. And then the second piece is this repetitive behaviors and or interests, which means that the student must have one of these two things. They don't necessarily need to have both, but they could. And we can see this in the way that they move. They might have some of the stereotype movements such as hand flapping or finger flicking, or we might also see things like a restricted interest where they're really fascinated, a very deep interest in one particular thing or topic. So if we know that part about individuals with ASD, then the next question is, how can we successfully include them? How can we provide those supports within these inclusive environments? So the first thing that we can do is we can organize our activities to provide some routine and structure. We know that individuals with ASD thrive on predictable, routine-oriented activities. And so whatever it is that you are doing, if you can provide more structure and heads up of what is going to come next, that helps the individual predict what is coming next. And this can be helpful for many people, not just individuals with ASD. The second thing is modes of responding. So we want to make sure that we are accepting multiple modes of responding. An individual with ASD may not prefer to communicate verbally. They may not be able to communicate verbally. They may use some type of AAC system where they are pointing at different pictures or typing into a device that then generates speech for them. And so what you can do to be inclusive is to address that individual directly rather than the person that may be with them, in order to acknowledge that they are in fact the ones communicating, and accept the type of communication that they are giving you rather than trying or only accepting the verbal type of communication that many of us are used to. And the other thing we can do is we can use clear, explicit language. So as we mentioned, individuals with ASD may have difficulties with communication. And so the more clear and explicit you can be in your language, the easier it is going to be for them to interpret it, and the less room for confusion or misinterpretation will exist. So things like idioms or metaphors might be very difficult, and you can avoid those things and instead be very direct and clear. One of the main pieces of advice that I give to teachers is, rather than saying, can you do XYZ, instead directly tell the student, please do this. And that way the student knows it's not an option, it's something that you want them to do. And then lastly, the number one thing I would tell any person who's working with an individual with ASD is to use visual supports. Visual supports are an evidence-based practice. They are extremely helpful. We know that individuals with ASD really benefit from visual supports. And so I'm going to just give you 3 very quick examples of visual supports. The first is boundaries, and we all use these in everyday life. The median in the road is an example of a boundary. We know that means we can't go over that line. For individuals with ASD, this might be the way that we're arranging our rooms, or it may be turning a paper over so they know that they are not to start that just yet. This is a type of a visual support that we can provide. The second is a schedule, and this can be an individual schedule that you give to the student or child themselves, or it can be something that's printed on the board or somewhere else for everyone to benefit from. And then the last type of visual schedule is a cue. And these types of cues can help the student or the individual themselves to become more independent. So we can use things like graphic organizers, we can use labels, we can type out instructions, and that takes away the verbal prompt from the adult or from the other person and transfers that responsibility onto the individual themselves. So as I mentioned, I would provide some resources. I have 8 wonderful resources. I use these frequently in my own life as both an educator and as a parent. So I would encourage you to check out these wonderful resources, and they have a good variety in here in terms of what you might be looking for. Thank you so much for joining me and for your time, and I hope to talk with many of you afterwards.
We are this is Ellen speaking. We are very excited to have that conversation in just a few moments. There are so many questions and follow-up and things that we can reflect on in our own daily experience. Thank you, Dr. Cox. And now we're going to hear from Annie. Annie is the director of the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing within the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. And I'd be curious to see if we can add that as one of the resources as well to Dr. Cox's list. She has over 10 years of experience in public administration. Annie is passionate about advocating for and elevating equitable practices which impact Michiganders who are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing. She serves as the secretary of the National Association of State Agencies for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and is a member of the 2020 leadership class of the Oakland County Executives Elite 40 Under 40. A little envious of that right there. Born deaf and a resident of Royal Oak, Annie graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. It is great honor and privilege to have gotten to know Annie just a little bit over these past couple weeks, and cannot wait to hear what it is that you're doing and the work that you are advancing. Thank you.
Great. Hello, this is Annie signing. I'm so happy to be here today. This is my name sign. It's the letter A right next to my chin. Obviously, one of the things that I really want to stress today is that our department is heavily focusing on promoting awareness about the various civil rights laws that could impact Michigan residents. We're trying to prevent discrimination from happening in all different protected classes. So we are committed to both the education and enforcement and engaging with the community itself. And as one perfect example, our division is housed underneath the Department of Civil Rights. And there's a little information about our division I think could be interesting to you. There's approximately 7.4% of Michigan residents who identify themselves as deaf, deafblind, or hard of hearing. That is roughly 800,000 residents here in the state of Michigan. So our goal is to focus on confirming the rights of those people and the community and what effective communication looks like. That means making sure there's equal access to ASL interpreters, to captioning services, making sure that they are able to enjoy the same level of experience that a hearing able-bodied person can when they're navigating employment, education, going into courts, maybe accessing public services. Our office is really dedicated to focusing on two primary things. Building relationships with those who might serve people in our community and making sure that they are aware of the various needs, preferences, experiences, and really the everyday barriers that our community faces. On this everyday basis, it's important to recognize those, but we're also developing relationships with people within the community and making sure they have the ability to access those services that the government has to offer. We provide training, and really our training tends to focus on cultural competency, understanding the various laws that apply to people in our community, and also looking for opportunities to partner in elevating awareness about the needs of our community. One more perfect example, many people in their everyday lives have never actually met a person who is deaf or has a disability. So they don't know what they don't know. And that's where we come in. That's where we come in to try to help remove those barriers by providing education and resources that they need to make sure that the services they provide are accessible and that person is able to take advantage of those. One key thing that we want to share here today is that often when it comes to understanding the needs of the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing individuals, people make assumptions. They make assumptions that they know what's going to fit best. So maybe they've met a deaf person who has one specific preference, and then you assume, or that person assumes that since that deaf person benefits from this one possibility, that's going to apply to all deaf people. But we do know that's not true. So we want to stress the idea that when you're thinking about effective communication and what that means to you, it might not be the same for someone with a disability. It's important to know that it's not a one-size-fits-all philosophy. Our community, and I really want to stress this, yes, it's a small community, but it's also a very, very diverse community. We are very intentional when it comes to stressing intersectionality within our community. That's an essential point that I really want to drive home here. For people watching this presentation today, one thing that I really want to make sure to stress, make sure to punctuate here is the importance of interacting with members of our community. When you engage with members of our community, if you're not sure about accommodations, about how to communicate, or maybe you're unsure about some cultural aspects, it's okay to ask. We want to be able to engage with you when you're making those decisions about what our needs are, especially when it comes to providing services and making sure things are fully accessible and inclusive. As the director, I am here to commit to the idea that when we start talking about the concept of equity, that we are also talking about diversity and inclusion. And equity really also needs to be included in the conversation about people with disabilities and accessibility. The only way that we can change mindsets for people when it comes to interacting with our community is making sure we show open-mindedness and show a willingness to be inclusive, to invite our community, to understand, to elevate the opportunities that we need in a way that maybe you've never thought about before. Maybe some of your programs and services don't have accessibility built into the process until maybe someone has to advocate or ask for accessibility, or maybe even someone files a complaint about it. How can we shift that mindset and that perspective to make sure that we integrate accessibility from the beginning? So it shouldn't be an afterthought. We want it to be a full part of the process. So that's why I encourage people to reach out to us, reach out to our department, but also our division. If you're looking for training opportunities or creative ways to collaborate to make sure that you are making your programs and services welcoming and inclusive for everyone who might want to access them. Thank you so much for your time.
This is Ellen speaking, and thank you, Director Uraski, for your words. And at this time, would like to invite both of you, including Dr. Cox, back onto the screen for some brief questions. And one of the pieces that was discussed was intersectionality. And so a curiosity or a wondering is directly related to autism, deaf, blind, hard of hearing communities. Are there intersections that you've experienced from in both communities? Have you seen the interplay between deaf, blind, hard of hearing and people with autism?
This is Annie signing. I'll go ahead and jump in on this one. Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Because understand, really within any community, you have many different levels of intersectionality, right? So for example, I identify as a white female who happens to be deaf. But I have privilege. I know that. My experience is completely different than maybe a deaf blind individual who's a person of color. And maybe, or someone who identifies with a different gender. Those experiences are completely different than mine for sure. So we have within our community, like I mentioned, although it's small, it's so very diverse. You can't just, and again, it goes back to this concept of you can't make an assumption about the community experience as a whole, just because we might sometimes have familiar or similar issues with communication accessibility. There's additional layers involved, and there's autism, there's oppression, there's ableism that we might experience at these different levels. So it's just important that, and it's something I want to emphasize, my privilege here is that I can speak about my experience and I can advocate for the needs of my community. But I also must acknowledge that there are other people within our community who maybe have their own unique voices, their own unique stories that they want to share. That's important when we're talking about inclusion.
Dr. Cox, to you, any reflection on the immediate intersections between, and it is right to warn, there is no monolithic experience in deaf, blind, hard of hearing communities as well within the autism spectrum disorder. We know that there's, each individual has different experience, different expression, all of those different components. But to you, is there experience within the autism spectrum disorder where you've seen deaf, blind, hard of hearing individuals?
So I think Annie did such a great job of talking about intersectionality and how that, how we as a community can be aware and acknowledge that there is intersectionality everywhere. So I personally have not experienced that specific intersectionality. I have certainly seen how intersectionality can impact families, particularly within the autism spectrum, because you do have many individuals who have a range. It is called a spectrum disorder because there are a huge range of not only what we see behaviorally, but also how much those behaviors impact their day-to-day lives. And that alone, there is so much diversity within, and that doesn't even take into account other aspects that inform how they are treated in the world. So many individuals with ASD do not communicate traditionally, and that can certainly impact how they are treated. When Annie's talking about, we want to make sure everyone has a voice, we do have quite a few individuals that do not have a traditional voice. They use AAC to communicate, and hopefully they have that opportunity. And one of the things that I try to work with families and teachers to make sure we're doing is, if we do have individuals who are not able to communicate, let's make sure that we are providing alternative ways to make sure that we can in fact hear what they are thinking, what they are feeling, and what their needs are, so we can meet them with what they need.
This is Ellen speaking, and thank you for that as well. There's a question or a wondering, and it was prompted by Dr. Cox, your picture of your family. And it appears that you might have been at Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World where that picture was taken. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Okay.
I graduated from Florida State, and our last year there, we used our 1 year of Disney experiences. So yes, that is where we were.
Okay. Thank you. So a question for both of you might be, and it might be unfair, so forgive me, or answer how you would like to answer based on the question that is asked. Dr. Cox, from your child's perspective, what might a trip to a place like Disney World pose in terms of opportunities as well as challenges and obstacles? And Annie, the same question to you. If and traveling to a place like Disney World, and I've seen a lot of interpreters there at different times or very scheduled experiences, but maybe walk us through from your vantage point, your experience or your child's experience, what a trip like that might symbolize, and then maybe anything that's transferable from that experience to our daily lives.
I can start. So I will say that this, of course, is my experience only. We had a very positive experience with Disney in particular. They did work very hard to try and provide an inclusive experience. I will say, as a parent of a child with autism, there was a lot of pre-work that we had to do. So there was no getting in the car and going to Disney. There was no surprising the children. This was a very intentional, this is something that we are going to do. I did the research on what the rides were. I showed videos beforehand to show what that ride might look like. There was a lot of choice options. Is this something you would want to do or not want to do? Because I knew that for my child, that was something that would help ease some of the anxiety that could have been experienced within the park. I will also say that parks like that in general are an opportunity for many children to experience anxiety and frustration and many other things. So those types of things, there are many things you just cannot plan for. So what we tried to do within our family was try to plan for the things that we knew were likely to create some type of difficulty for our particular child and deal with those ahead of time so that when the other challenges arose, we could deal with them rather than dealing with the other things all the way through. We also, when I mentioned we did it for the year, we used it as an opportunity for repeated exposure. So we tried once, we went for a couple of hours, we left. We tried another weekend, we went for a few more hours, and then we left. And we used it as an opportunity to talk with our child about what worked well, what didn't work well, what did you experience, how did you feel about certain things, and also to challenge them to try different things, try to find something that you might like instead, in the same way that we would challenge the other child. So that was our personal experience.
All right, this is Annie signing. This is a really great question. From the perspective of a person who identifies as being deaf, deafblind, or hard of hearing, it's critical that people understand we live in a world that is designed by and for hearing able-bodied individuals generally. So when we think about everyday life, depending on the kind of environment that I'm in or who I'm interacting with, what I'm doing, I have to think about, okay, well, this person that I'm interacting with, will they understand my needs? Will they know I need to have an interpreter present for any event where there's going to be a lot of audio content or people speaking? If I'm staying in a hotel, maybe I need a room that has a fire alarm that has, a visual fire alarm with a flashing light, or like an adaptive phone maybe is something that, could be provided, different devices like that. So often when we choose to go visit a place like Disney World, for example, we have to think about, okay, we have to make sure the interpreter's requested fairly far in advance. We have to figure out what areas of the park could be accessible for us to navigate individually. And if we have to interact one-on-one with a person who maybe has never met a deaf person before, and there's a little bit of, there's a little level of anxiety that's created just from anticipating that. And it's, generally this can be common for anybody with a disability, but you spend so much time advocating and educating just for our needs, just to make sure that you understand why my experience or why I may experience barriers and how we can remove those. So it can be frustrating because if we're dealing with a person that's maybe shows either ignorance or just doesn't understand the legal obligations, or even isn't showing a willingness to be open-minded, that causes a level of frustration because now it's okay, I have to spend even more time to advocate because I'm getting pushback, rather than just having this smooth, accessible experience where everything is already designed and worked out and there's no unexpected issues that pop up. So often we have to plan far in advance and we have to think about all these things first. It's important that if you go to a place like Disney, you make sure that you represent or you describe what your needs are, what your accessibility looks like, what kind of accommodations you require, and get that in place beforehand. And if Disney is willing to do it, that's showing an open-mindedness. That's showing a willingness to recognize an opportunity for myself and other individuals to go spend money at your park, to utilize your services that you offer. So it shows that willingness to invest in our community and by showing that you recognize our needs. I don't want to sound negative at all. Like it's, by saying it's exhausting, it's frustrating, it's difficult, but it's just important for people to understand that sometimes it is those things. Like we need to see that recognition. It's validating. Sometimes we need to be validated. And have them just say, oh, okay, we trust you. So I can say, okay, I trust you. You're going to bring an interpreter. You're going to have accessibility and I don't have to fight for it at every step.
This is Ellen speaking, and thank you both for that. What we'll do is provide a question we won't answer right now, but we'll circle back to after we hear from the two additional panelists. And that question is more visionary, more what does the preferred future look like? What might universal design look like? And so after we hear from our next two panelists, we will open up with that particular question, if that is, and then everybody could respond to that particular question as well. And thank you both so much for sharing your personal, your professional experiences and sharing those with us. It means the world. And so now we would like to introduce two additional panelists. Elena Lael. Elena is the rights representative of the Division of Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing within the Michigan Department of Civil Rights as well. Elena is a Chicago native and apparently really likes the hockey team that originates in Chicago and identifies herself as deaf. She now lives in Farmington after having graduated with a Bachelor of Science and Technology in International Hospitality and Food Travel Management from Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. Elena is passionate about advocating for people who are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing, and continues to fight for their equality. And we now turn that over to you, Elena. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here today. Really, the point that I was going to talk about with Disney, that's interesting. They brought up so much and such a strong memory for me when I went as a child. I was just thinking back on that Disney experience. It was great. But anyways, to shift back to the point today, again, like you said, my name is Elena and I'm a rights representative. My work tends to be focused on providing training and education to many different providers. I also tend to focus on the youth, our younger generation of deaf, blind, and hard of hearing people. I invest my time in educating, supporting, and advocating for them to make sure that they understand how to navigate the world when they become 18 and they're suddenly independent. How do they make their own decisions? How do they deal with tough experiences, face barriers? How do they work to solve and to solve these problems and find a better way than it was back in the 80s and 90s? You know, these younger kids can learn a better way, a better approach to solve these experiences. They can learn some wisdom from past generations and then develop some new, more creative ways. I also work for a nonprofit organization here in Michigan to help connect and make sure that we're building partnerships and collaborations, make sure that we can work together to brainstorm different ideas and different ways that we can increase resources for accessibility, again, for the younger generation, the younger Michigan residents. I also am always looking for different ideas for more civic engagement. Michigan Department of Civil Rights can support the community, and we want to figure out how we can do that better. Like Annie mentioned in the beginning, is just a perfect example. She made a perfect point about the deaf community. It's all about the community. It's all about supporting and transparency, gathering data and information and making sure that we can provide the most accessible resources so people are able to understand and apply for these resources without any barriers. That's our mission. That's my specialty. I want to break down all those barriers then so that everyone in our community isn't having to face these with a harder road than everybody else. Again, thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to answering your questions.
This is Ellen speaking. Thank you so much, Elena. And we will circle right back with some questions after we hear from Tony. And glad that your Disney memories are also very positive as well. So next up speaking is Anthony Lewis. Anthony is the Director of Community Engagement for the Michigan Department of Civil Rights as well. And we are so appreciative of their support as a whole in the whole agency. He previously served as a community relations specialist and an investigator with the department. As he leads the department's community engagement programming and initiatives throughout the state, Anthony has developed numerous presentations and programs on cultural diversity, civil rights law, and other questions of conversations and enforcement. Anthony is a graduate of Florida A&M University with a bachelor's degree in business economics and labor relations. And it's an honor to hear what you have to say here, Anthony, in ways that we can plug into the work that you're doing.
Well, Ellen, thank you. And I just, and actually, my colleagues, Annie and Elena have done such an excellent job of what we offer here with the department. And I just do want to say, I didn't know that Dr. Cox was what I like to call a fellow Tallahassee alum. So it's pretty cool it's pretty cool to know that. But so from what I would like to speak on is from a youth perspective. One of the programs that we have at the Department of Civil Rights, so one of our outreach efforts is really to promote youth voice, and that's really giving our youth the opportunity to express their views on their needs and giving them the opportunity on what they would like to see as changes to their own education and and have them speak in their own way. And one of those things we have is what's called a Civil Rights Youth Academy. And the way I can explain it is it's a series of partnerships. And we have a partnership with the University of Michigan, in which they have what's called a Summer Youth Dialogues program. And then we work with young people from various parts of Southeast Michigan, and working with them on just that one. On cultural competency within themselves, because it's an intergroup, we like to call it intergroup dialogue, where we have groups from different backgrounds, from different ethnic backgrounds, different races, and they come together at U of M during the summer and work with the U of M staff and some of our youth organizers, and basically in developing plans and in developing their ideas on some of the things they want to do when they return to their schools in the fall, and some of the work they want to do on social justice issues, on civil rights issues, or just, as I said, issues affecting them and their communities. And one of the things that I know that we've been exploring is especially with today's topic, and myself and like I said, myself and Annie have often kind of kicked around talking about we need to connect because we do have because our deaf, blind, hard of hearing community and our young people. That's for ourselves and from our youth academy perspective, it's an underserved community, and we definitely need to increase that partnership. And one of the things that we're doing is outreach, and what happens is that means that we have to do significant outreach and continue those partnerships. But on a global scale, like I said, on a global scale, we've partnered with, we now have Western Michigan University is now online as far as working with us and becoming a part of our network of youth programming for our Civil Rights Youth Academy. And they will have now a group of social justice fellows participating in our social justice fellowship there at Western Michigan University, serving that southwest corner of the state for our young people there. So as you can see, we have, we're growing our youth involvement and trying to really help our youth find their way of expressing what their needs are and what they're seeing in their communities, and via these multiple partnerships. And I foresee that definitely for anyone who would like to participate, for anyone who would like to support, for anyone who would like to know just how do we get involved, how do we create more of those partnerships, please feel free to reach out. And as I said, or to reach out with Annie or Elena. And as we grow our partnerships and we grow our partnerships and we continue to move forward with our work in that youth space, we're definitely looking for helping our deaf, blind, and hard of hearing young people to find their, to find their way in terms of communicating, to help elevate them in communicating their needs and what's important, their needs and the needs that what they're seeing in their communities. So we're also looking forward to this. But thank you, and I welcome all questions. And like I said, one of the things I can say is thank you for this opportunity.
This is Ellen speaking, and thank you so much for being here. And at this time, we invite all the panelists to join us on camera, if that is available to you, to go through a couple quick questions. And for people that are watching, you are more than welcome to put questions in the chat and we will monitor, or just jump in and ask the questions. There are two questions that surfaced in particular, and the first one has to do with a traditional supply and demand type question. So are there, or what might be some of the, are there needs for more interpreters, or what might be some of the obstacles for existing interpreters to work on accessibility and communication? One of the experiences that we've heard about as of late is perhaps even a backlog in being able to certify interpreters. And the same kind of question in terms of teachers, both general education and special education teachers who have the talents to work and to cultivate, and then along with teachers or administrators working to advance civil rights, as a whole concept. So what might be some of the obstacles that you see in terms of having the people who can help do this work, whether it is interpreter work, it is classroom work, as a whole?
This is Annie signing. I'll go ahead and start. I think generally speaking, you mentioned teachers in the classroom working in education and that field in general. I think it's critical that we make sure to have the right people at the table, the right people involved in the conversation. Often when we talk about accessibility, it tends to be the resources and information shared that it's not maybe a full exhaustive list of resources. So I think it's important that we have the local community involved. For example, we have experienced a situation where we have parents that are requesting a local advocate for a deaf mentor program to help sort of elevate the importance of having the appropriately qualified interpreters in the classroom, or bringing in someone who can really highlight and stress how important it is to invest in self-advocacy skills for students in the classroom. That's a really great example of what actually Elena does for our department. Is she connects with local deaf and hard of hearing programs. She works with teachers and staff and really interacts with the students who are still trying to learn how to navigate their part of the journey, you know, and how they're learning even how to identify as deaf, blind, or hard of hearing students, learning how to develop those internal skills. So, you know, knowing once I transition out of school, how can I advocate for myself? How can I make sure that I do have an interpreter when needed? How can I make sure that the resources that I have can help me to grow and thrive in employment, in other, you know, post-secondary school opportunities? But it really, I think it all goes back to starting with the foundation of building those connections with the K-12 programs, starting as young as we can to make sure that students are exposed to both teachers, special education administrators, parents, other students, interpreters who work in those programs, and knowing how we can all partner together to make that system better. We can look at the system and figure out how to improve it, but also we can build those partnerships and those relationships with each other, because I really think that's the only way we're going to have a good pulse, a good understanding of what's happening in the state when it comes to making sure that we are providing appropriate quality services for those students. And then just one other thing I want to mention too is that people who might be watching who maybe are not certified yet, or they want to become an interpreter, I would recommend connecting with your local interpreter training program. Connect with your local Michigan registration for interpreters for the deaf. It's Michigan RID is what it is. And it's sort of the statewide chapter for the professional development organization. And they really help to build and support our Michigan interpreters here. And also connecting with LARA, Licensing and Regulatory Affairs within the state of Michigan. They oversee the interpreting certification process, all of the CEUs, the continuing education process. So there are available resources. Just make sure that you're making those connections with the ones that are available, and take advantage of what you can. If you have any questions or concerns, or just sort of need to discuss anything on this topic, of course, you can always reach out to our office as well.
Thank you. I am going to jump in because I agree with a lot of what Annie has said. I will say, as someone who works with people who are working to become teachers or are currently teachers, it seems to me that a lot of this starts actually in our K-12 systems. So if we have students who are successfully included, they see it, they go on to appreciate all of the benefits and understand and realize it as the way that it should be, that it's doable, that it is actually beneficial for everyone. And then when they enter into that college experience, they come in with that belief already. I also encounter individuals who think of the special education system as a separate entity, that there is a special ed silo and that there is a gen ed silo, and the kids who might spend time in both of these environments are just kind of out there floating. And, you know, we see this from different perspectives. So it's not just one person or another, but for me, a lot of it comes from that. So for successful inclusion to really happen, like Annie said, you need people at the table, but you don't just need the people who are working around the clock to include individuals with disabilities. You really need more people from the community. We need to convince people that this is a thing that is important for everyone, not just someone who encounters this in their daily lives. And that's going to make the difference from my perspective.
Elena or Tony, would either of you like to address that question as well?
Tony, do you want to go ahead? Okay, this is Elena. This is Elena speaking, and I do want to add just one thing to what Annie mentioned about what that one size fits all approach. Sometimes we have to be very mindful of just because one qualified interpreter has their certification, they're great, doesn't mean it's going to be successful communication with every deaf person they try to work with. I see it all the time with appointing authorities and education providers that they ask people, what's important is they ask people with a disability, are you okay with this particular provider? What are your communication preferences? Make sure that the deaf person is included in the interactive process. It's so very important for our community and for anyone with a disability. But it's just like Annie mentioned earlier. People tend to make a lot of assumptions about what's best for you based on what they've already seen, but it should be the other way around. Only you know what's best for you. Only you know and can express what your needs are and what accessibility would be best for you to make sure that it's equitable and equal access to communication. I think that that's very important for people to understand, but also that support is there. And that's why the Michigan Department of Civil Rights and the division is here to be that support, to be a resource, in part of that process to make sure that equal accessibility is provided for everyone.
Actually, I do want to jump in just to supplement what Annie and Elena and Sarah are saying. I think that it's important in terms of support, especially in terms of support, but also amplifying so that our young people are able to express what their needs are. And I think Elena, what you said is being involved in that interactive process, but I think also support, and you find support in numbers. And I think that's where if you have a robust, in terms of what I talked about earlier, youth engagement programming, where you're engaging our young people so they are involved in their interactive process, and they are involved in being able to express what their needs are, so that they can be directly involved and feel, because and when you are directly involved and you're engaged, it gives you you have a feeling of ownership. Not only you have a feeling of ownership of the process itself, and I think that that's important in terms of having a robust youth engagement program, especially in our schools, and not just simply a youth engagement program for cultural competency, and for which tends to be narrowly tailored to race, race and or gender. But I think that we definitely need a robust youth engagement program in our schools and in our communities is from a holistic approach, but also where we are ensuring that we are making sure that everyone is able to, all our young people, express their needs so that we can attend to their individual needs and collectively. But I think that's important because I just wanted to jump in on that in terms of support and how, from a youth perspective and a youth organizing perspective, how we can, ways to support that.
This is Ellen speaking. Thank you all for addressing that question. We have one very specific follow-up question, and then we'll do the briefest of rapid fire, and then the envisioned future will be our takeaway for the day. So the specific follow-up question has to do with what we understand to be a backlog in interpreter certification at the state level. And so the question at hand is, to what degree does MDCR have, or are they working with the LARA licensing in order to clear a backlog of interpreters? Is that something that is on the radar at MDCR? And if so, what are some actions that people can take to work on getting more interpreters certified?
This is Annie signing. I'm happy to address that. We do have a strong relationship with LARA. It's under the Bureau of Community Health Systems now that manages the interpreter process. That's where all of the Michigan Certified Interpreter Program details are taken care of. So people can reach out to us if they have any additional questions or concerns. We're absolutely happy to elevate that issue with the people at LARA who handle this. We do have an advisory council that meets, well, right now because of COVID, it's been suspended. Our in-person meetings have been suspended, but we do always invite LARA staff to come to our advisory meetings. We tend to meet 3 times a year. They give an update, a report about the program, the numbers, what's going on, and that allows the community to really get engaged and feel like they're involved as members. We also we do communicate with them often to see if there's questions or concerns that pop up that we can help them address. Right now, the Bureau of Community Health Systems just recently moved. So if you try to contact them and you're not sure where to get the specific contact information, again, if you contact us, we will lead you in the right direction. The other thing I want to mention with interpreters here in Michigan is I do think it's important that, and again, this really goes back to the state level support. It's important that we have the Michigan Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. We have LARA, we have our office, we have people that are invested and want to build those connections and those relationships within the community. So I hope that answers your question.
This is Ellen speaking. Yeah, it does. And I think it provides an avenue where if people do have concerns, they know who and how now to reach out. And so that is helpful. Thank you so much. So briefly, we will ask 3 questions and you're welcome to shout out or sign as the answers come to you. But we would like to know a little bit more about the human side of each one of you. So first question, favorite season?
Fall. Oh, sorry, this is Sarah speaking. Fall.
Elena says fall as well. Annie says summer.
This is Tony speaking. I'd have to say fall. I'm a football fan, so I have to say fall.
This is Ellen. Favorite ice cream? If ice cream.
This is Tony speaking. I say butter pecan.
Tony, would you say butter pecan?
Yes.
This is Annie. Mint chocolate chip. This is Elena. Ooh, there's so many different. I don't know if I can pick just one flavor, but if I had to, I would say like French vanilla with Oreos. Very simple.
This is Sarah. I'm with Annie. Mint chocolate chip is my favorite as well.
Thank you. This is Ellen. And favorite quote or saying? No pressure.
That's a good one. This is Annie. That's a good one. This is Annie. One that I typically stress often is there's no I in team. I just think that that's a great one. We can't, we can't be successful just alone. We have to be willing to work together and build those relationships and collaborate when we can. That's the only way we can really influence change.
This is Tony speaking. I like a spin on, I guess everyone calls it the golden rule. Do unto others or treat others how you want to be treated. I kind of have a spin on that where I choose to say treat others how they want to be treated. So for me, I look at it a little differently. Treat people how they want to be treated.
This is Elena. Gosh, I'm trying to find, I've got a little list over here. So if opportunity knocks, if the opportunity doesn't knock, build the door. So, if opportunity comes into your life, you never know what it's going to look like. You never know what it's going to bring. You never know what kind of experience would come with it. So build the door.
I don't have a saying per se, sorry, this is Sarah. I would say something along the lines of, if you don't know, ask. Don't assume, don't guess, don't take what you've seen on media and believe it to be true. Ask someone, and ask many people.
This is Ellen. Thank you for those. It's nice to get to know more of the human side and what makes you you. And we'll leave the final words in your hands. So the question is, how would you describe, or what door would you build in order to create your preferred future? What does an equitable future look like from your perspective? And as you start to answer, I want to just take a moment and thank each one of you for your expertise, your wisdom, sharing the personal and professional vulnerabilities that you did. I know it will make a difference to so many people, and we are here to help in any way that we can. So thank you.
This is Annie. I'll go ahead and start. I think for me, nothing's perfect, of course, recognizing that, but we can work together to build a more equitable world. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to require people to be willing to be open-minded, and to really show their willingness to let it reflect and respecting other people's and their opinions and their values and their beliefs. The only way that we can really achieve a more inclusive world is by having the conversations like this, by continuing to build off of conversations like this. We start looking for opportunities to collaborate, to reach out, to start building those relationships, because that's the only way that we can really change minds. We have to have the conversations like this one. So I'd like to see this continue. This is Elena signing. Another kind of quote related to this too is always expect the unexpected. When I see the younger generation, something pops up, some difficult experience, they are able to know how to navigate it. They are able to overcome that experience and make that experience a positive rather than keeping it a negative. And so I really want to see that younger generation learn, improve their skills, improve their expertise, and understand and be able to show and feel comfortable in their own identity. And so they too can work to elevate equality for everyone in this very diverse world. Again, it's the open-mindedness, and like you said, it's never making assumptions. So again, thank you so much for having me here today.
This is Tony speaking. I think you asked about what door would you build, or what would you, I think for an equitable, I think I would build a bridge. I think more I look at it in terms of building a bridge, and with mirrors that show people that we all, I believe that everyone at its core wants the same things. We just have different routes on how to get there, for ourselves and for our families, I think for the most part. And I just think that if we can, it's just unfortunate that, we're in a society where we all want the same things, but only certain groups in our society have access to be able to make that, a reality. And that's where I would like to see these bridges such as this, community conversations such as this, that bridge, that help to bridge that gap, to help to bridge that communication gap, that resource sharing gap, and help to continue to bridge those gaps to lead us towards that more equitable society.
This is Sarah. Those are all great. I will add, from my perspective, a lot of the families that I work with, I see that one of the issues of access really comes from stigma. So there are many families who are not interested in going through the diagnostic process because the word autism has such a negative stigma in their minds or in their communities or wherever they are. And so because of the way our community is structured, if you refuse to go through the diagnostic process, you have no avenue for supports. And so who really is impacted by that is the child themselves. They do not receive the supports that they need. And so for me, if there was a way to remove that stigma to be able to get the resources, and because we have so many resources and just so many access opportunities, and it is a shame to deprive someone of that because of this negative stigma that is attached to it.
This is Ellen speaking. Again, I want to thank you all for being here, for sharing your stories and the overall support. And it is a hope that we have to build that bridge and to make the new doors in order to make sure that we're doing what's right for us as individuals and for our communities as a whole. So thank you for joining us. We're going to stop the recording in just a moment, and know that this will be available on the MCCE website, which is miciviced.org. And we will also share it out with anybody else who is interested, and that will include a link to Dr. Cox's resources as well, and perhaps some contact information for those from the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and your experiences.